What if the proof that opens your inner sight is already written on your body? And the small, overlooked organ most people call the pineal is the key the industry rarely talks about. Imagine an ancient map, not carved on stone but traced across flesh and memory. Now imagine that map pointing toward a tiny, luminous seat inside your head. That is the claim we will explore together, carefully, respectfully, and with a clear line between what is suggested and what is proven. Before we begin, I want to promise you something simple. You can test this for yourself, right now, with nothing but breath and attention. No doctrine required, no expert standing between you and what you might discover. If, during our first check, you sense even the smallest stir, a warmth, a clarity, a shift in the space behind your eyes, type the word recognition in the comments so others can know they are not alone. A few words of context. In 1945, jars were found in Upper Egypt near Nag Hammadi containing texts that had been hidden for centuries. Among those writings is the Gospel of Philip, part of what scholars call the Nag Hammadi Library, Gnostic texts that were read and interpreted by communities who prized inner knowing, memory of a higher source, and methods for confirming that memory in the body. These texts were marginalized by mainstream institutions for reasons that are complex and historical. That marginalization is part of why many of these ideas feel like secrets to us now. Gnostic teachings often speak of a primal source, the mon or monad, and of lesser controllers, sometimes called the demiurge and the archontes, who obscure or mislead. Think of these figures less as caricatures and more as metaphors for forces that keep attention turned outward, for narratives that convince us to look away from inner evidence. The people whom Gnostic writers called the pneumatic, those with spirit awakening, were said to carry marks, physical or energetic signs, that could be verified by touch and attention. What follows is an interpretation of that map, offered as a hypothesis, a way to use your body as a laboratory of perception and to consider the pineal, described in spiritual traditions as a small seat of inner light, as a possible fulcrum for these experiences. This is interpretive, not medical or historical assertion. We will move in 3 clear steps. First, we'll check a point at the base of the skull that many traditions link with origin and grounding. Second, we will attend to the side of the hand as a sensing edge of perception. Third, we'll rest our attention at the center of the chest, an external place of command and integration. After each check, notice what is present. Then we will bring those observations into a cautious conversation with the idea of the pineal. Begin by finding a comfortable, upright position. Let your shoulders soften. Take a few slow breaths, in and out. Allow your eyes to rest softly, or close them if that feels safe. This is not a test you pass or fail. It is a noticing practice. Be curious, not judgmental. Base of the skull, the point of origin. Place both hands gently at the base of your skull where the skull meets the neck. You can cup the occiput with the pads of your fingers, or let the palms rest lightly. Feel the bones, the tendons, the place where your head joins your neck. Breathe into that space. Do not try to make anything happen. Just breathe and be present to sensations. Warmth, vibration, pressure, stillness, memory. Notice if anything shifts in your field of awareness. A looseness of thought, an image, a subtle expansion. If nothing happens, that is also information. The Gospel of Philip and other Nag Hammadi texts talk about an origin mark, a sign of belonging to the mon, felt at the root of the head. One way to read that is symbolically. This place anchors the remembered origin. Another way to read it is experientially. When attention comes to rest here, some people report a sense of homecoming, like a return to a source. Neither claim is a scientific description of anatomy. They are invitations to personal verification. Lift your hands now and rub the sides of your hands together, feeling heat, texture, and the subtle electrical life that moves across the skin. Then extend the right hand outward and turn the palm so the little finger side faces you, the lateral edge of the hand. This is the perception edge. Run your attention slowly along this side of the hand, from the wrist toward the pinky. Press lightly. Pay attention to the way touch changes sensation. Is your breath affected? Does your hearing sharpen? Does the color behind your eyes shift? The lateral hand has been used in many traditions as a sensing antenna, a way the body signals readiness to perceive other kinds of information. If you feel a twitch or a flutter, or a brightening of inner sight, don't explain it away. Curiosity is your ally. The Nag Hammadi writings speak of a mark of perception that reveals whether someone can receive the higher memory. Again, this is a framework for noticing, not a biological diagnosis. Your body is a witness. Your attention is the instrument. Now bring both palms to the sternum point, the very center of the chest, where your rib cage meets and where the sternum lies near the heart. Press gently with the flat of your fingers, as if pressing a silent button. Here the texts speak of command, an external place from which the soul, once recognized, can act in the world. Notice what happens when you press here. Does your voice change even in the smallness of breath? Do you feel steadier, as if a name is being remembered? Do images rise, or does silence deepen? Some people report a sense of authority settling into the body, a permission to move differently through daily life. Observe without insisting on any particular outcome. Across these three spots, the base of the skull, the lateral hand, the center of the chest, the Gnostic map places markers. The proposal we are exploring is that the pineal, understood in many spiritual traditions as a seat of inner light, functions as an integrative center for experiences associated with these marks. The pineal is small. In spiritual language, it is often called the third eye. In anatomical language, it is part of the brain's deep structures. The bridge I am offering is interpretive. One way to read the three marks is that they converge in the inner field of perception where the pineal is understood to operate. This is a suggestion for contemplation and somatic testing, not a medical or historical assertion. Why bring the pineal into this conversation at all? Because across cultures, the idea of a central, inward organ of vision appears repeatedly. In the Upanishads, in Hermetic notes, in later Christian mystical reflections. Some researchers and alternative thinkers argue that modern institutions, academic, medical, or religious, have discouraged popular engagement with this idea. Whether that is a deliberate suppression or a byproduct of specialization is a separate historical question. What matters for us is practical. Does attention to that inner seat change your moment-to-moment experience? That is something only you can check. As you rest your hands where you prefer, perhaps at the base of the skull, on the lateral hand, or the chest, allow your breath to become an anchoring instrument. Breathe toward the point. Imagine breath as a soft tide, and observe. Notice the quality of light in your inner field. Some people describe a cooling clarity behind the eyes, a small flicker, a sense of a threshold being approached. Others feel energetic shifts along the spine or a quieting of the habitual mental commentary. If these things happen, they are private, subjective data. They do not prove a universal claim. They are, however, meaningful to you. Now, expect resistance. Name it. Call it the inner critic, or call it archontic interference if that language resonates. The Gnostic texts personify certain obstructive patterns as archontes, forces that distract, shame, or convince us to rely on external authority rather than inner verification. When you notice doubt, derision, or immediate dismissal spring up, when your mind tells you this is silly, or imagines you are being tricked, do not be frightened. This is part of the process. Resistance is often the sign that something of value is being approached. Observe the critic without arguing. Say to yourself, silently, I hear you. Let the thought pass like a cloud, then return to the sensation. This method, witness the resistance, then return, is a form of inner calibration. It helps you distinguish between what is merely a habitual doubt and what is a substantive, clear signal in your body. Many who have worked with the 3-mark practice find that the presence of resistance actually correlates with deeper movement beneath it. In other words, the archontes may show up precisely because something of transformative potential is near. If you felt anything at all during the checks, even merely a shift in attention, that counts as data. It is not proof of doctrines or ancient lineages, but it is an opening. Share that opening with others if you wish. Remember the early prompt. If you felt a stir during the first check, type recognition in the comments. That single word helps build a quiet map of people who are noticing similar phenomena. Community recognition matters because it breaks isolation. You realize you are not alone in your inner experiences, and that shared witness can be a form of validation without institutional mediation. Let me offer a few clarifications that protect you from misunderstanding. First, when I speak of the pineal in spiritual terms, I am not making a medical claim. Neuroscience studies the pineal in relation to hormonal rhythms and other functions, and the scientific record is complex and evolving. When I mention industry, I am using a shorthand for the ways institutions, pharmaceutical, academic, religious, media, can, through specialization and authority, make certain kinds of personal knowledge feel invalid. Whether that is intentional suppression or an effect of professional boundaries is not the point here. The point is your sovereignty, your right to test, to notice, and to decide. Second, when I refer to the Gospel of Philip or other Nag Hammadi texts, I am presenting them as historical documents read by communities with their own beliefs. These are not canonical for many traditions, and they contain language and symbolic practices that require interpretation. When I say that these texts speak of marks, I mean that within those writings there is a discourse about bodily signs of inner belonging. Reading them is like reading a map. The map uses metaphor, ritual, and image to help travelers find their way. Third, this practice is not a replacement for medical or psychological care. If you have concerns about your health, seek qualified professionals. This is an invitation to inner exploration, not a clinical protocol. Now, let us return to the idea of activation. Activation, in this context, means setting intention and aligning attention to the places we have already explored. It is not a magic ritual that guarantees results. It is a practice of deliberate notice, phrased simply and personally. If you choose to participate, place the hand positions that felt most significant to you during the checks. You may place one hand at the base of the skull, one hand along the lateral edge, or both hands over the center of the chest. Close your eyes if that helps. Take a breath and frame a simple, declarative phrase silently or aloud. Here is one option you can speak once, as a personal declaration. I claim my light, my sight awakens, I stand. Say it once, say it as yours. No prophecy implied, no guarantee offered. Let the sentence be an orientation, a reminder that you are choosing to notice and to take responsibility for the evidence of your own interior life. After speaking, rest and observe whatever follows. Notice whether the body changes, whether the inner field brightens, whether your tone shifts. Record nothing but what you experienced. If you want, return later to repeat the practice. Across many traditions, practices like this were never intended to create dependence on a teacher or an institution. They were tools for personal verification. The Gospel of Philip and similar writings framed such signs as ways to recognize those who had remembered. The modern reinterpretation I am inviting you to take is that the pineal, whether as symbol or as a functional organ, depending on your belief, can be a focal point for integrating these markers. This is an interpretive bridge. It asks you to experiment and to keep your inner authority intact. You may find that nothing dramatic happens the first time. That is common. Subtle practices often require repetition, patience, and a gentle curiosity. Other times, people report immediate shifts, a softening of anxiety, a sudden clarity, a remembered image. Neither outcome is better than the other. Both are honest data. If skepticism remains dominant in you, use it. Skepticism can be a helpful filter, preventing gullibility. Invite it to be your companion rather than your executioner. Ask the critic to specify what it fears. Often the critic fears loss of identity or the embarrassment of being misled. Name that fear. Let it sit beside you without letting it decide for you. There is a social component to this work. If you feel called to share your experiences, choose a community where curiosity and discernment are both honored. Avoid forums that demand immediate certainty. Look instead for groups that value personal verification and measured interpretation. The goal is not to recruit, but to find fellow witnesses who will say, "I noticed that too," or "Here is what I felt differently," and thereby expand the map. Finally, a note on the industry in our title. When people say what the industry doesn't want you to know, they often mean that systems of authority can create gatekeeping by labeling certain experiences as illegitimate or by privileging certain narratives. My aim here is not to stoke paranoia, but to restore your confidence in your own sensory evidence. You do not need a permission slip from any institution to attend to what your body reveals. Before we close, allow a few moments to integrate. Sit quietly and breathe. Notice what has shifted since the opening. A settledness, a tension softened, a curiosity deepened. If you felt a stir during the initial checks and keyed recognition in the comments, take a moment to read those responses. Let them remind you that inner experiences are often shared across cultures and lifetimes. If this invitation resonated with you, come back for more. In the next session, we will explore gentle practices for sustaining attention toward the inner field, including breath patterns that support clarity and small movement sequences that create receptivity. We will continue to honor boundaries between spiritual interpretation and scientific claim, and we will keep personal verification at the center. Speak once, if you will, that single declaration aloud as your own. I claim my light, my sight awakens, I stand. Let it be a marker of intention rather than a promise of outcome. If you found something here that touched you, an idea, a feeling, a curiosity, subscribe to the channel and join the next guided activation. We will gather as companions in exploration, not as converts. Please bring discernment, patience, and a willingness to check for yourself. Remember, this is your work, your evidence, your sovereignty. The maps of the past, Nag Hammadi, the Gospel of Philip, many mystical traditions, offer roots and metaphors. You are the traveler who tests the path with breath and attention. The pineal is proposed here as a meaningful symbol and possible fulcrum. Treat it as hypothesis, not dogma. Go gently. Be brave enough to notice. Be kind enough to yourself when doubt arrives. And know this. Whatever you sense, whether it is silence or spark, it matters. It is part of the slow rediscovery of how your body remembers the possibility of inner sight.